How we doing? All right, that's better. So the first thing I have to do is apologize. My Hebrew is not great, but I was FaceTiming with my nieces in California, actually just 2 or 3 days ago. They're 10 years old and they're 8 years old. And they both go to Hebrew school every Sunday in California. And I said, I'm coming to Israel. And the older one, the 10-year-old, was like, oh, Uncle Alex, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know in Hebrew. You need to know this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this. I'm like, hold on. And the 8-year-old is just sitting quietly, just listening and looking at her sister and nodding occasionally. And the 10-year-old, who's kind of a spaz, was like, okay, and then this, cartoons are on, I have to go. And it's just my 8-year-old. And she waits until her sister's out of the earshot. And she goes, Uncle Alex, I'm going to tell you the only word that you need to know. You ready? The word that you need to know is l'chaim. And I was like, okay. And she's like, and what you have to do is when you're with your friends in Israel and you're all having a Diet Coke, you have to stand up and you have to yell it the loudest, because the person who says it the loudest is the winner. And I was like, well, this is gold. I mean, this is absolutely spot on. So, forgive me for doing this in English, but I am truly honored to be here, to be part of this conversation, a very valuable conversation about customer experience. I don't think we talk about it enough. I like to talk about how we can stand out. I'm rather fascinated by this idea of how we elevate ourselves above the noise, above the crowd, to stand out above our competitors and really make the connections with the people that matter to us the most, our customers, the people that are interested in what we do. And I'm not going to stand here for the next half an hour, 45 minutes and say, okay, write this down. Step 1, do this. Step 2, do that. I'm not going to do that. I think it would be boring. I think it would be too easy for you. And I think it assumes that I know everything I need to know about your business and your industry, which of course I don't. Instead, what I'd like to do is share some ideas, examples, philosophies that I have been a part of, that I have experienced as a customer, or that I have seen fly by in the world that I've just rather enjoyed. And I hope that I can equip you with, at the very least, some inspiration and maybe a little bit of entertainment at the same time. And the examples I'm going to share are from huge companies that I know that you have all heard of, as well as 1- and 2-person startups that I am very sure that none of you have heard of. And that's fine. That's okay. In fact, I would argue that the lessons we can learn from those very, very small 1- and 2-person companies are even more valuable because they don't have any money. They don't have any resources. They have to be creative. They have to think differently to do the things that we're going to be talking about. Fundamentally, the landscape of business, in its simplest terms, has changed more in the last 15 years than it has in all of the history before it. That is completely exhausting to try and keep up with. What worked 2 years ago is completely outdated and inefficient today. I like to argue that we don't actually need to keep up with it. And I hope I can convince you too by the end of this. In the olden days, about 15 years ago, marketing was... Okay, who is a marketer here? I'll ask this question first. Not many of you. Okay, marketers. I'm a career marketer. I've spent most of my life in marketing. I'm going to tell everyone our little secret. Marketing is the easiest job in the world, or at least it was until we ruined it with the internet. Back 15 years ago and before, 50s, 60s, 70s, marketing was a completely one-way broadcast. It was not a conversation. We would put our billboard or our TV commercial out there saying, buy our product, use our service, whatever, and there was no way for the public to interact with that message. You can't connect with the company on Twitter before Twitter's been invented. You can't email them before we've invented email. So we marketers like to take advantage of things, and we took advantage of this idea very, very quickly, to the point where it became ridiculous. These are all real ads from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Basically, smoke cigarettes and you will get healthier. We don't even let cigarette companies advertise anymore in many parts of the world. If they tried something like this, collectively we have the tools available to us to destroy them in about 24 hours. You mean a woman can open it? That's a feature of this product, by the way. So the next time you're putting out your new product or service, it's faster than the competition, it's cheaper, it's easier to use, and women can use it. Try that. I dare you. Watch what happens. And let's not overlook the very obvious sexual imagery in this picture. They knew exactly what they were doing in the 1950s. For my technical people in the room, you mean this is a computer? And then the single greatest strapline in advertising history, you bet your sweet telex operator it is. I don't even know what that means. But this next one, I have framed in my office at home because I think it shows how far we've come in this conversation. I also think it shows how far we've come as a species. You ready? Blow in her face and she'll follow you anywhere. Ladies, is that true? And I've been doing it wrong. They are no longer in business, I'd like to point out. Now, there is a certain demographic, and I would like to think that most of you are part of this demographic, that traditional advertising doesn't really work on us. It just bounces right off. We know exactly what's happening. We know exactly what they want us to do or to feel, and we ignore it. Now, modern marketers use this word influencer. They think they've solved this problem by coming up with a stupid word that doesn't mean anything, when in reality, marketers understood this decades ago, 50, 60, 70 years ago, by placing the message in the hand of someone with authority, with a voice, a celebrity, we can get around that barrier that we've put up between us and the consumer. So, if you don't believe a brand, then perhaps you will believe legendary American comedian Bob Hope in perhaps the creepiest picture I've ever seen. And if Bob says smoke Chesterfield cigarettes, well, you'll smoke Chesterfield cigarettes, won't you? Now, you're all smart people. You know exactly what's happening here. Bob may not like Chesterfield cigarettes, but they paid him enough money for him to overlook that minor detail. You know that he's been paid to say this. So if you don't believe your doctor, then you will believe, or you don't believe Bob Hope, then you will believe your doctor there. And if your doctor says, hey, little Timmy, you should smoke Camel cigarettes, little Timmy will grow up smoking Camel cigarettes. No one is ever sure if they should laugh at that. It's fine. Timmy's been dead for a long time. But the reason we can laugh at these is because we have moved so far away from this type of relationship between the consumer and the brand that not only are they ineffective, in 30 years they've become highly offensive. That's how quickly these are moving. And more importantly, the relationship between consumer and brand has changed forever. As customers, we will no longer tolerate being abused by brands. The power has shifted so far away from the brand and back to the consumer. This is a good thing, by the way, that it has completely changed the way we have to look at ourselves as brands and our relationship with the customer. The myth that we are busting in 2019 and beyond is that you can put out a product or service and that's enough. Absolutely not the case. There are so many more ingredients necessary to create something of value, of interest, of joy that is beyond the core product or service. And for me, the most important one, I would argue, is a sense of emotion. Relax, I'm not getting all hippie, motivational speaker on you here. There's some science, I think, that's worth exploring. Creating a sense of emotion is the only ingredient, as far as I'm concerned, for loyalty. I am obsessed with the idea of loyalty. Loyalty to a brand, loyalty to a person, loyalty to a dog. It doesn't really matter what it is. Loyalty is something I have studied for my entire career. I'm nowhere near understanding it in its entirety. It's very complicated. But the one certainty that I have is that loyalty is a fundamentally emotional thing. You cannot have real loyalty without feeling something. There's this, did anybody watch Mad Men when it was on TV? It was a show about the advertising exec. Yeah, it's basically like porn for marketing people. I loved it. But this quote really got to me. How I feel when I experience your product, that is what gets me coming back. How I feel when I take the lid off the box for the first time and hold the product in my hand, that is what gets me coming back. How I feel when I step off the street and into your store, that is what gets me coming back. How I feel when I am pissed off and I call your company, how I feel at the end of that call, that is what gets me coming back. And there is a Canadian neuroscientist called Dr. Donald Cullen, whose work I'm doing a great disservice by compressing into these two words. But about 30 years ago, he wrote a very, very, very boring book. But in that boring book was this gold nugget. I don't think he realized how important this was when he discovered it. He basically figured out that if you want someone to actually do something, to act, it is far more efficient to appeal to the emotional side of who they are. We're not talking about different parts of the brain, we're just talking about components of who we are psychologically. Why? Well, he figured out that reason will lead to conclusion. 1 + 1 = 2. The specifications of this product will meet my needs, but they won't actually get me to stop looking through the window and go into the shop, or click buy, or pick up the phone, or sign the contract. To do that, we have to appeal to the emotional side of who we are, because that is where action is driven from. Emotion is regulated by the limbic system in the brain, which also, and this is not a coincidence, is where action is also driven from. So they are physiologically and psychologically and biologically linked together. Now, I understand that I have been very theoretical so far, so I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. What product or service do you love that you use every single day, and maybe you have since you were a child? Gives you that lovely, warm, fuzzy feeling every time you use it or you see their advertising. What product or brand or service could you not live without? Give them to me. Shout them out. I don't take you as a shy people. Apple? I get that a lot. Netflix? Yeah, I'm a recent convert to Netflix. So I did this once, and from the back of a very dark room, I just heard, beer. And I was like, Mom? Anyway, mine is Diet Coke. There is absolutely nothing better to me, as you may have already figured out, in this whole world than a cool, crisp, no, they're not paying me, refreshing can of Diet Coke. I know it's going to hit the spot. I know it's going to taste the same no matter where I go in the world. I am 100% brand loyal to Diet Coke. So much so that if I go to a bar or a restaurant and I say, can I have a Diet Coke, please? And they're like, oh, would Diet Pepsi be okay? It's like they've spit on my grandmother. How dare you? How dare you? Now, the reasonable, rational, logical part of my brain is like, dude, it's the same thing. It's brown water in a tin can that is slowly killing you. Settle down before they throw us out. But the emotional part of me is like, let's burn this place to the ground. Now, if I can have such a passionate, emotional response to something as silly as brown water in a can, there is not a single product or service on this earth that cannot create that level of connection with somebody somewhere. And ultimately, that's what we're after. And a great way, I think, to do this is to remember that behind every click and every call is a human being. And now more than ever, we demand that you treat us like a human being. For the longest time, basically since we learned how to stand up and talk, this was the only way to do business. I would go into a shop and I would tell the person what I needed. They would take me to where that object was in the shop. I would give them money. They would give me the object. That's how it worked. And then the internet, or the web, I should say, came along, and we said, okay, look, this is great. We can sell to many more people, but it's really hard in 1995 to treat everyone as an individual on the internet. So let's come back and we'll do that later when the technology gets better. And let's go and build PayPal and Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook and all that crap. Except we forgot to come back to it. We forgot, and instead we just built layers of technology to make our businesses more efficient that were actually pushing the customer further and further away, when really all they wanted was to get closer and closer to us. And it's really, really done a lot of damage. And it sounds expensive and complicated, like, $1 million CRM software to treat each customer in real time as they come to our online. That's not what I'm talking about. It's little things, as far as I'm concerned. Great customer experience, and you heard that earlier today already, is the coming together of lots of little tiny moments of delight to create something unique and something wonderful for every customer that comes into contact with you. I'll give you an example. There is a hotel in New York City that I first went to about 10 years ago. Boutique hotel, small, not part of a big chain at all. And when you check into a hotel, you have to fill out a form, almost always. First name, last name, email address, passport number, sometimes all that crap. This one at the bottom said, what are your favorite snacks? And I was like, oh, for God's sake, blah, 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 blah. Diet Coke, obviously. Completed the check-in process, went downtown for some meetings. When I came back to my hotel room later that day, went up to my room, there was a handwritten note from the manager saying, Dear Alex, because that's my name, welcome, we hope you have a great stay, blah, 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 blah. Basket full of my favorite snacks and a fridge full of Diet Coke. This is the greatest hotel in the world. Now, that's a cheap psychological trick pioneered by the Mandarin Oriental Group decades ago. By understanding and listening to what the customer tells you and what they infer in writing, you can find ways to place something in their room that is at least familiar, that is at least taking a very same templated room that's the same as all of the other rooms in the hotel and making it feel unique. I see something that's familiar. I smell a familiar smell, something. And all of a sudden, I'm no longer in a cube 5,000 miles away from my family. I'm somewhere comfortable. I'm in an extension of my home. I'm relaxed. And all that positive brand love goes back to the Mandarin Oriental Group. That's not what they did right. Here's what they did right. Every time I go back to that hotel, 6 weeks, 6 months, 2 years later, doesn't matter. They have these machines now for check-in. I don't have to talk to anybody. It's wonderful. Press the buttons, get my key, go straight up to my room. But when I get there, there is a note. Dear Alex, welcome back. Context. Basket full of snacks, fridge full of Diet Coke. It sounds so simple. But in reality, it is a complete transformation of the way that they perceive me. I am no longer a transaction to be optimized for money. I am part of an equal relationship in which we are both participating and investing. Not doing this at a human level would be the equivalent of me in a situation like this going, hey, how's it going? I'm Alex. Nice to meet you, and then going away for 30 seconds and coming back and going, hey, how's it going? I'm Alex. And you'd be like, dude, we just met. You're kind of a dick for not remembering that. And you would be right. We would never do that to another human being. Why would we do it to our customers? And that's this fatal trap that we fall into time and time again. And the wonderful thing is, if we change the way we view the customer, all this data that was useless to us is now priceless, because we can understand our relationship with the customer, and I think just as importantly, we can use this data to unlock moments of delight for the customer inside and alongside the core user journey. I'll give you an example. I have a gold card on Virgin Atlantic, not because I used to work for their parent company, but because I travel way too much. And I usually sit in economy, in the cheap seats, not in the pointy end of the airplane. So I earned that thing the hard way. And has anybody here flown on Virgin Atlantic? Maybe one or two of you. Okay, they're not great, I'm not gonna lie. The inside of the airplane, when you compare it to like Cathay Pacific or Singapore Airlines, I mean, not even close. They don't have the gold toilets or anything like that. It's ridiculous. But where Virgin Atlantic, and I would argue much of the Virgin Group makes a difference, is understanding the value of a repeat customer. And this was all brought home to me very recently. I was flying from San Francisco back to London, you know, in the cheap seats. And about 90 seconds after takeoff, no more, the wheels had just gone up, there was an announcement that said, "Would Alex Hunter please make himself known to a member of the cabin crew?" And I was like, crap. Oh, well, we're still in the air. They can't throw me off. Ding. Moments later, a member of the cabin crew comes up to me and hands me a glass of champagne and says, "From your friend in a high place." And I was like, "Richard Branson, you're so sweet." That's not what happened. So obviously I have a friend who's an air traffic controller at San Francisco. That's not what's cool about this story. Okay, that is kind of cool. What's cool about that story, and what still gives me goosebumps listening to that story, is those pilots were handed a piece of information at the single busiest point of the flight, moments before they pushed the throttle forward and took 250 people halfway across the earth. That piece of information was completely irrelevant to the safe passage of that flight. They could have very easily said, "Yeah, sure, we'll do that for you." "No, we won't, because we're really busy right now." And that would have been completely understandable. But instead, they chose to call up one of their colleagues from the cabin and say, "This person is on board. They're a friend of the air traffic controller who got us out a few minutes early." That's it. That was the extent of the conversation. Now, I can assure you as fact, there is not a single word in the Virgin Atlantic Flight Attendant Employee Handbook that says, in the event that there is a friend of the air traffic controller on board the flight, give them 50 cents worth of mediocre sparkling wine. Not a word of it. I guarantee that. But there is entire chapters in the Virgin Atlantic Employee Handbook, as there are throughout the group, entire chapters dedicated to this concept. Inspiring, allowing, endorsing, and in many cases financing customer-facing staff to find unique and creative ways to create moments of delight for guests, no matter where they're sitting in the airplane, not just in first class. So I am sitting in seat 72B, last row of economy, middle seat, next to the screaming child, or 3 screaming children in my case, and I have got my glass of champagne, and I feel like $1 million. What did it cost them? About 50 cents. This is not a complicated, it's fine, it's supposed to be like that. Yeah, it's good.
That was 4809.
Oh, we're gonna hear it again, that's fine. Here, watch this. Now, comes back to this wonderful word that we've ruined this word. Wow. Mark it is. We've ruined it. But it's such a wonderful word when you pare it back. It is a word that comes out of us naturally, primally, organically, when something truly extraordinary happens. I was in everywhere. What is Hebrew for wow? Wow. Yes! See what I mean? In Norwegian, it's wow. In French, it's pretty much the same. No matter where I go around the world, it's basically the same. It just slips out of us. It's a wonderful word, and I am crusading for it to come back because I think it is something that we should all be aspiring towards. Does everybody know what that is? The Nest. It's a thermostat. It was created by Tony Fadell, who is he was the inventor of the iPod, co-inventor of the iPhone. And when he left Apple with his billions of dollars, literally, he could have done anything in the whole wide world. But he said, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to do air conditioning, because that sounds fun. No one's ever said that. Now, the cynical person inside me says that they could have taken the white boxes that we all have in our homes and our offices and made them available in 5 wacky colors, and we would have gone, oh my God, they've Appleized thermostats. I'm going to pay $50 more for the red one than the white one, because that's how stupid we are as a species. But that's not what they did. They took a step back and said, well, hold on a minute. We have an opportunity here to revolutionize something that is core to human comfort, the environment in which we spend most of our time. So they made it intelligent. They connected it to these devices which we carry with us 24 hours a day. But they also made the physical part of it, the bit I interact with, so beautiful that I just want to lick it, right? It's art. And now you have people saying, hey, dude, why don't you come to my house after work and look at my thermostat? That shouldn't happen, ever. But it does. So there is not anything on this earth, a product, a service, everything in between, that we cannot at least aspire to create this wonderful sense of this wonderful word, wow, in everything that we do. I like telling this story. There is a British science fiction author, called Arthur C. Clarke. He wrote 2001: A Space Odyssey and many other things. And he had this wonderful saying, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Translation, as a customer, I do not care how it works. I care that it works. The technology required to make the product do its job is completely irrelevant to me. But the experiences and the comfort and the moments that you can unlock for me are priceless. The first time I showed my father Uber was about 5 years ago. This is a day's worth of Uber traffic in London. It was a Friday night in central London. It was raining sideways, like it always does in London where I live. And my father was getting that kind of angry old man anger. And I was like, just cool, it's cool, we'll just get an Uber. And he's like, what's Uber? I was like, well, look, right here. And he's like, oh, look, the little cars are moving around. And I say, yeah, here's ours right now. As far as my father knows, his son pressed a button on his phone and a flipping car appeared. As far as my father knows, his son is a witch. Now, my father does not care about the technology required to make that moment happen. He doesn't care about the politics of the organization or the IPO price or the battles that rage in just about every city between taxi drivers and Uber drivers. All he cares about is that he can go anywhere in the world, pretty much, press a button on his phone, a car will appear, he gets in, he doesn't have to say anything, but will somehow take him to where he wants to go, and he gets out and he doesn't have to pay. He hasn't figured out that it's attached to his credit card, but we'll let that go for a little bit longer. To the point now where I will get messages from my father saying, Alex, they've got Uber in Singapore. I'm like, Dad, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, I don't care. But this sense of, wow, the packaging is far more important, the experience is far more important. And what comes out of that is this wonderful C word, not that C word, this C word. Community, again, one that we've ruined. I like this story because I think community is something very powerful. It is a group of people who cluster around something that is important to them. Not all the time, could be irregularly, but they are drawn to it. And I love telling this story because I think it shows how powerful this can be. There is a friend of mine in the UK. He's an American, and he worked for Skype, and then Microsoft bought Skype for $800 billion or whatever it was, and he said, I'm tired, I'm done with technology, but I love London, it's a great city. The only thing I don't like is you can't get good Mexican food here. 100% true. As a Californian, it kept me up at night. So he said, I'm going to start a burrito restaurant, and if you don't know what a burrito is, I'll explain later. He picked the worst moment in human history to open a fast casual restaurant. It was months before the economy just in London really just fell on its face. Traffic into restaurants like this was at an all-time low, and he was about 6 weeks away from not being able to pay his staff. He knew he had a good product. I knew he had a good product. I eat there all the time. I got very fat. He just needed to get people away from their routine into this restaurant to experience it. Once they did, he would be okay. So he said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to hold the UK's first burrito eating competition. It will cost £10 to enter. All the money's going to go to charity. This isn't about making money. This is about raising awareness. And I just want to show you how fun something like this can be, because this guy was a journalist for one of the big newspapers in the UK. And he wanted to win this, so he's got his protective equipment on. And he's going, oh, so a burrito, if you're not familiar with it, is a wrap filled with meat, cheese, rice, vegetables, about the size of a baby. And the challenge was to see how quickly you could eat it. So immediately the whistle goes, and he is off. And immediately it starts to go very, very wrong for him. Oh, gosh. Are you going to see a man being sick? I don't know. Oh. He was all right. He survived. He did not win. My brother won. My brother is the reigning UK burrito eating champion. We're all very proud of him. Anyway, this was written about in every single newspaper in the UK, every industry journal in advertising, in F&B, FMCG, as a creative, cost-effective, unique way to introduce a foreign food concept to a cynical British public. Now, they have gone from one struggling outlet in North London to 20 chains across the UK. They raised £8 million in crowdfunding. People who love their product so much, they gave them their money. And when a big American conglomerate came in and said, we're going to crush you, they couldn't replicate that level of engagement, and they left. Meanwhile, my friends have thrived. Now, I used to be the CEO of an online music company, and I'm going to run through this quickly because we're low on time, but I used to write handwritten notes as the CEO to our most active users every week just to say thank you for doing what you do. And this was breaking down this wall of online and offline, which we put up ourselves, and it's silly. Just taking half an hour of my time and maybe $10 worth of postage, people were like, oh my God, I got a letter handwritten in the 21st century that's not demanding money. What's happening here? And our engagement metrics went through the roof with these people that we reached out. It was a very efficient way of doing it. But I'll tell you this, if you do reach out to your customers with your own beautiful hands, and I strongly encourage you to do this, make sure it's 200 written notes and not 20,000 printed notes with dear sir and or madam, because then something like this will happen. Dear Null. That's from my bank. If my bank can't figure out how to do a mail merge in Microsoft Word, can they really keep my money safe in 2019? No, the answer is no. The answer to that question is no. I no longer bank with them. Now, I love this subject. I'm fascinated by how brand experience moves across geography and culture. It's something I learned the hard way at the Virgin Group. Many of you may have heard this business school anecdote that GE used to have one global strategy that they deployed in Buenos Aires, Boston, Beijing, and beyond. Now they have 160 different strategies for 160 different countries. I'm very sure that's not true, but you get the idea. Everything has to change because everywhere is different. Now, FedEx, there's this wonderful word. I hate this word, but it actually does a good job of explaining the concept. Globalization, localization, awful. The undisputed heavyweight champions of the world of this idea, love them or hate them, are McDonald's. Now, you can go anywhere in the world and go into a McDonald's, even if you don't speak the language or even recognize the characters. But you know exactly what to do. You walk to the back of the restaurant, you point at a picture of the food you want, you give them money, they give you food, you eat it, and you hope for the best, right? And that experience also goes across the menu. You can go pretty much anywhere in the world and get a Big Mac, a Quarter Pounder, and help me out, McMuffin, anywhere in the world. But if you go to India, where a large part of the population don't eat beef for religious reasons, going in there with the Big Mac and its 2 all-beef patties would not only be business suicide, it would be, frankly, hugely offensive. So in India, you cannot get the Big Mac, but instead you have the Maharaja Mac. It's essentially a chicken Big Mac. I've had it. It's fine. In Korea, you get the bulgogi burger, and in many parts of Southeast Asia, you get the McVeg, which is just a potato croquette. In Hong Kong, where I grew up, you get the black burger, which is squid ink, and then that stuff on the bottom is mashed potato. I don't recommend it. Now, it extends beyond that as well. Around the world, Ronald McDonald is the creepy clown ambassador responsible for selling fast food to children. But in France, McDonald's France went to McDonald's global headquarters and said, "Oh, guys, Ronald McDonald's creeping out French kids. I don't know what to tell you. It's just not working." McDonald's Global had the common sense to say, "Guys, you know your audience better than we ever could. Do what you think makes sense." So they fired Ronald McDonald, and they licensed beloved children's French literature characters, Asterix and Obelix, to sell fast food to children in France. And it's done really well. But having that confidence in the elasticity of the brand is very rare as companies get to the size of McDonald's, and it's scaled to an extraordinary level. I was part of the team that founded Virgin America, something I'm very proud of, the airline. And I was taught this about consistency. I learned it. It was something that was brought to me. And this was the state of the American domestic market. How many of you have flown on an American airline? Right, so you know it's like slamming your hands on a door over and over again. It was awful, or at least it was back then. So we could argue that with a little bit of Uncle Richard Branson's money, we could beat that with this. This was the inside of a Virgin America airplane in 2005, which at the time for the American market was completely revolutionary. But what we very quickly realized was this was the last part of the journey. To get to this, you had to go and book a ticket, go to the airport, check in, go through security, and board. If any one of those steps had been less good than the promise we were making with the inside of the airplane, people would step on board and say, "Yes, nice, shiny airplane, but it took an hour and a half to check in. You're terrible." And they would be right. So we had to imagine the inside of the airplane. I don't know how many of you own an Airbus, but that's what it looks like when it comes from the factory. So we couldn't rely on that. We had to go and look at the entire experience. And a step that we took, that to this day hardly any company takes, is we identified every single point at which a consumer could interact with us. Every one. Obviously, this is just a small selection of them. It was tens of thousands. And made sure that in isolation, it reflected in simplest terms how we were different by the words we used, by the words we chose not to use, the color, the tone of voice, the imagery. So no matter how you came to us, you would understand how we were different. A lot of those things are people. People are not as easy to craft as a table or a check-in desk or an airplane. So we made sure that when you joined the company, no matter what your role was, from the CEO down, you went through a full day of brand workshop and training so you understood at an emotional level what we were trying to achieve. And that scaled far more elegantly than just telling people what to do. This is the topic I want to end on. For the longest time, online and offline was one thing, right? There was a big wall. You weren't allowed to go and talk to the online guys in the basement because they were scary geeks. Those days are gone. Because we all have these wonderful devices available to us 24 hours a day, we've now expected brands and consumers, as you heard in that video at the beginning of today, to be available for us 24 hours a day. We want to switch up the platform halfway through the conversation. We'll email you with an order and then call you up and expect to finish the order. And God help you if you ask me for information I've already given you. And it sounds complicated, but I love telling this story. This is a subscription coffee company based in the UK. Every 2 weeks, coffee appears in your letterbox. Coffee grounds, not liquid coffee. That would be awful. And when this interaction happened, they were a two-person company, 2 guys working part-time in an industrial part of London. It was the Saturday before Christmas, which was, up until very recently, the busiest retail day of the year in the UK. I was in my grandmother's house in the countryside in England, and I have no shame in telling you that I was very, very hungover. And I did not want to move any part of my body because it hurt too much, except my thumb. So I was just flicking through Twitter when I saw this tweet, this ad, sponsored tweet. I did not follow them, saying, proper coffee, hand roasted and delivered fresh to home, blah, 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 blah. Now, we all have that one word that drives us crazy, that makes us angry every time we hear it, every time we see it. You're thinking of yours right now. It could be moist, it could be shrub, it could be pencil. I don't know. Mine is proper. I hate that word so much. I think it's lazy. I think it's elitist. I think it's self-aggrandizing. And I was so blinded by my brand rage that I actually replied to a sponsored tweet and said, negative points for using the word proper. You're better than that, love a loyal subscriber. I put my phone away, having done my angry old man branding bit, and I continued my hangover. Saturday before Christmas, 2 people. Moments later, my phone, I get a notification. Sorry, we didn't mean to sound snobbish. We're just looking for a word that conveys good taste. Maybe just tasty. Ha, 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 ha. Now, I am a firm believer that if you genuinely believe in the quality of what you do, you have every right to be confident. Confidence in a brand, just like confidence in a human being, is very attractive. And I said that. I said, I think you could legitimately refer to yourselves as great, as great. Keep doing what you're doing. They replied very humbly. And I thought, great, that's a wonderful case study. I can't wait to share this on stage. This is just amazing. A big company would have just gone, oh, psycho, blocked, and I never would have heard from them again. But they didn't. Because here's what happened. That Monday, we're wrapping up the office for Christmas. There's a knock at the door, and it's a delivery person who hands us a box. Inside that box is a ton of their coffee and a handwritten note that says, Dear Alex, we hope you and your loved ones enjoy this over the festive period. Great coffee, sent fresh, love packed. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's good. Not only did they figure out who I was, that I wasn't a psychopath, take the time to box up some coffee, write a handwritten note that referenced an online conversation, but we were already customers. They were just treating us how we should be treated. I'm going to go through this quickly. There's actually nothing left to say, except you are in this room because you are already doing great things. Don't get distracted by technology. Just find ways to connect at a human level with the people who think you are doing wonderful things already. Keep the conversation positive, build those great experiences, and you will continue to thrive. I cannot tell you how much of an honor it's been to be part of this conversation. Thank you.